All right. Thank you for being here. Bonnie Kelso, writer, illustrator, designer. I like all of those because they encompass so much. How does your experience in exhibit design affect or inform how you do storytelling in writing and pictures?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, my background is in exhibit design. I worked as an exhibit designer for 12 years. Um, and when I left exhibit design, I went into fine art, which was what I studied. So it was kind of a bouncing back and forth sort of career path for me. I learned exhibit design on the job. So
Mm.
it's kind of different than other people's experience. But yeah, I would say when I'm doing a book project, I do think a lot about those times as an exhibit designer because I did a lot of graphic design for the exhibits as well. And we had, sort of that same hierarchy of type size and, um, you know, as far as importance goes, like, you've got your headline and then your subhead and then your body text and then sidebars and all that kind of stuff, especially when I'm doing nonfiction work. I think about that a lot. So.
Does exhibit design deal with how the exhibit is laid out, like what pieces are put where? And in an exhibit like that, are you trying to tell a story? Like I think about mainly it might be a lost art too, or a lost thing to people less than 30 years old for sure, where album design used to be so important. Like you bought an album or a tape and then you looked at the jacket of it and the order of the songs mattered from the way the band or whoever laid it out. And now you just listen to songs in any order. And I wonder if we're missing things, but is it the
Yeah.
same in like art layout design?
Yeah, I like that comparison to the album. Yeah, exhibit design is a lot like that. We're telling a story as people move through the exhibit. Generally when people walk in, they go to the right. It's just like a natural thing. People will walk into a room, they go to the right. So usually there's that sort of circular or winding path that goes through an exhibit. There's an entrance and an exit. So that is kind of interesting.
Wow. I wonder if Europeans enter or tend to go to the left just because of like road design.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
I read an article
The
once that
only
talked
what?
read an article that talked about how they lay out ladies and men's restrooms and how they put women's rooms on the left usually because women turn left most of the time and guys
Oh,
turn
really?
right. But I've seen them on both sides, so don't use
Right.
that when you're trying to go in. You might end up in the wrong place.
I've never heard that one before. Interesting. Yeah, as far as European, the only European exhibit I did was with Italians. So I think they still drive on the right, but
Hmm. Yeah, it's a strange thing. Like we can't all get together on that, but
right.
I think nobody wants to give up their way of doing it. So
Exactly. We're creatures of habit.
yeah, humanity hasn't gotten to that point yet where they can figure it out. So then with your exhibits, that's is that what you went to RISD for, was exhibit design?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Wow,
I
good,
I studied
good.
printmaking at RISD. So, I had always done a lot of, drawing and painting, watercolors, acrylics, oils, that kind of stuff, in high school, and that was what my portfolio was built on. Got into RISD, and then after the freshman year, you have this freshman foundation course where they let you explore all kinds of different things and try to figure out what you want to major in. So after that first year, I chose printmaking because I just thought it would be really fun to learn how to do all these old printmaking techniques that people don't really use anymore. But I
Is there
remember my
a big call for printmaking in the world these days, or is there
not
a
so
market for it?
much, not so much. It's still a lot of fun for fine. It's a fine art now. So it's not like back in the Middle Ages when they used it to, actually print propaganda or something to, you know, tell people about things. It's more like, I guess if you think back on like Andy Warhol's work, he did a lot of silk screens. So silk screens are still, I'd say, pretty viable. Etchings are more of the black and white, where you're like etching into metal plate and then you print it through the press. Those are, I mean, gosh, yeah, you just don't really see that much of that kind of art anymore. I can't remember the last time I saw etchings in like a contemporary art show. But
Yeah, I have a couple of those my brother did when he was in art school, and then
mhm,
the prints I have some from some other people I used to work with that are art people, and they have some that did some prints on like
mhm,
wood blocks and ink.
yeah.
That's fun. So
And then lithographs, like I think for a while people were making lithographs to make copies of artwork, but now with digital, it's all giclée and, inkjet prints and that kind of stuff. So you don't really see lithography as much either.
is lithography like the photo exposure, or is that
Yeah, it
something
can
different?
be. Yeah,
Okay.
you can actually draw on a stone or a plate as well. It's sort of like a
Mm,
oil and water don't mix kind of chemistry. And
okay.
so with the photo emulsion, that does the same thing. It gives the plate the traction for the ink. But again, it's, you use rollers to roll the ink over it and then you run it through the
Yeah.
press and everything. There's either like stones or metal plates. So
We did
yeah.
that silk screening growing up, I guess. You sit it out in
Yeah.
the sun for a little while, or either you use an X-Acto knife, and if you're doing letters, that's easier for that. But if you're doing pictures, it was like one, we didn't do multi-tone stuff that much, just like a picture of a
Black and
tree is
white.
easier to do that way
Mhm.
than it is to try to cut it out.
Cool.
Huh. Andy Warhol, I read an article recently that said Andy Warhol didn't appear until Marilyn Monroe died, and that Andy Warhol is Marilyn Monroe. Any thoughts on that?
Wow.
It's a good story. You
That's a
check that
deep
out when you
dive.
get time.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
have to look into that.
You look at the right stuff, you start to believe it. You start to believe that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he would have to have had a lot of plastic surgery because, she was very like soft and rotund, and he was very like
Yeah.
beanpole, straight, angular. So that, I don't know. That would
I
be a
mean, I'm
lot of work. I
50%
don't know if
convinced.
this is I don't know if plastic surgery was advanced back then enough to do that. Maybe nowadays, I don't know.
Or she just clicked on in her mind the starving artist, and then I mean, when somebody loses that much weight, they look different. The gaunt really comes out. So I don't
Right.
know. I
Right.
don't know. That and the moon landing, some things to look at, in your spare time.
Right. Okay.
So then, RISD.
Mhm.
I did a half Ironman in, I think it was 2008 or 2009 in Rhode Island. And I picked Rhode Island because I was like, okay, it'll be a little colder and it'll be flat. But it was not flat at all.
No.
Not flat.
I'm sure it was downtown too, where the
It was
river
a
is,
seven
right?
mile at the end. It was the 7 mile loop going up by Brown,
Uh-huh.
and that's a serious hill.
Yes.
A serious
Yes.
hill.
And don't you have to swim in an Ironman?
Yep, we swam out. In my head, I don't have the map connected, but it was a half Ironman, so you're only swimming like a mile and a half. And they said
Okay.
the protected waters of somewhere, but when we got there, it started late because there was a storm, and it looked like ocean waves. Like they were
Oh, wow.
8 to 10 foot waves, and they
Oh my
said
god.
you don't have to do the swimming part if you don't want to. You can just start on the bike. And I was like, wow, you pay all this money, train all this time, you got to go out there and brave the sea monsters. And it was my swim time. It wasn't great, but then my bike time was close to my run time. My run time was less than the bike time, but still 63, 65 miles. biking through the rolling hills of Rhode Island is what they called it, but it's a
Yeah,
climb
it's
and then it's a dive and it's a climb and it's a
right.
dive. So going
Yeah,
downhill, I was great, but uphill, I mean, your momentum doesn't carry you that far up a hill.
right,
So
right.
shift early, shift often.
There are
But I made it.
flatter places in Rhode Island, so they were really cruel to you, I
Mm.
would say.
Yeah,
I guess
and then
that's the iron part, you know?
the 7 mile loop twice through
Oh
downtown
gosh.
was the
Yeah.
tough part. Because then you're like, I got to go up and down this hill again. And
Yes.
yeah. Mm. Anyway, that's when we got there for that weekend. We went to RISD and looked at some of the things there, took a tour of the college. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Pretty nice. I'm
Did you
not
get
sure
to
how much
see
has
the
changed.
library and,
Yep.
the museum? Those were my
Hmm.
favorite places. I volunteered for both of those
Okay.
places, my
Yeah,
hangouts.
it was nice. I thought maybe art school wouldn't be that bad,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was good. So then you go to art school and then start in something that isn't what you went to school for.
Right.
And then now starting, I can't remember how long ago you started the writing. Was that 2017?
Yeah.
The writing and
Mhm.
picture books?
Yep.
So your career of exhibit design was from art school to starting writing books?
No, in between, I had, well, there were, like, 3 years where I traveled just because I wanted to.
Okay.
So, I had, hit the, um I had a condo in Washington, DC area, and I bought it really cheap and sold it for a good profit. And so I was like, "Oh, okay, what am I gonna do? I totally wanna travel." So I just, like, went out backpacking and traveled all over the world, and would only come back to the States, to get more visas or because visas were a lot harder to get. You had to, wait forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did that for a little while, and then when I was actually trying to plan for another trip when I met my, now ex-husband, but, we started getting into a lot of, like, outdoor stuff, canyoneering and rock climbing and all that kinda stuff out here in the West, and, eventually we had some kids, and so, you know, everything was kind of sidetracked for a little while, but, now my kids are a little older, and I'm kinda like, "Yeah, now it's time to go back to those childhood dreams of my own," and I realized, like, I really did wanna make books and illustrate books. That was I mean, I literally have a piece of paper I found that I wrote when I was, like, 8 years old saying, "When I grow up, I wanna make books." Because I like to write and I like to draw, and I want 2 kids and a dog.
Okay.
And I was
Nice.
like, "Wow, well, I've done all those other things. I need to start making some books." So,
It's good to have goals. Good to have
yeah,
goals.
exactly.
So then when you start thinking like the first thoughts of a picture book, is it pictures you think about first, or is it the story, or how does
Mhm.
it develop from nothing to something?
Right. For me, sometimes it's a topic. Like, we have a lot of quail out here in the desert, and I was like, oh, I really enjoy watching them, and especially the little quail chicks. I find them so entertaining, and I do a lot of hiking, and they just dart across the trail, and it's so cute how they all go in a line, and like one will kind of command the others, and they'll call to each other, and they're really entertaining. And I was like, yeah, I wonder how I can make this thing in nature appealing to kids, or how can I write a story that relates to their daily life? And, you know, so that's kind of how it evolved into this story about sort of the leader who could be like the troop leader or the teacher or the parent or something, sort of keeping the chicks in line and telling them the rules. And of course one decides to break all the rules and gets in trouble, but you know that was kind of the starting point of that.
Do you write the story out first and then think which ones will be the like which pictures you'll go with which parts of the story, or do you have to pace it out to where you have the whole story written and then say, I need a
Mhm.
picture here, I need a picture here, I need a picture here?
Yeah, with picture books, it's Yeah, I mean, you have a picture on every page pretty much. So, I think as I'm writing, I'm visualizing the page turns, like in the pacing. So I'm writing, like I know that if I write this many words, it's a good time for a pause. So you
Mm.
might be turning the page at this point, or how is the story going to be broken up into little sections? And maybe the exhibit design in me like comes out at that point too, because you can't expect someone to stand in front of a big panel and just read, 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 read. I mean, art museums do that all the time and it drives me crazy. It's like everyone's standing there, like, getting tired of standing, like trying to read this entire biography of an artist or something
Mhm.
before they go into the exhibit. But when we're doing visitor centers or things for the Smithsonian, where it's more like user friendly for all ages, we tend to like, chop the text up a lot and bring it through that, pathway. So,
I've noticed the new grift in the art world is taking like the Picasso exhibit and putting it, like projecting it on big walls in a warehouse or a space. But then as you're walking into it, you have those big panels of a lot of reading. And you're like, man, I got to read this thing. Now I got to walk 10 steps. I got to read this other thing. I haven't seen any Picasso yet. Now I'm going to walk 10 more steps, read this thing. And then you end up in the space, which is like 2 or 3 rooms, and it's just the stuff projected on it. And every now and then with Picasso, it like his eyes will blink in the picture, and you're like, hey, wait a minute. But it
that's kind
does
of weird
seem like, yeah,
watching you.
it seems a bit of a grift for the price it was to go through there to look at Picasso's
uh,
paintings projected on a wall. But yeah,
right,
figure
right. I haven't
it was.
seen that one. I did do we have an illuminarium here and they don't do a text panel in the beginning. They just kind of set you into the room and then it's projections all over the room kind of thing. They did one of Georgia O'Keeffe, which was interesting because they did a lot of this sort of kaleidoscope stuff of her
Mm,
work. And so it was a different way of, viewing her work for sure. I don't know
that's
if someone who had never seen her work before and came in there would really have a authentic appreciation for her work, but it was an interesting experience.
it's the sounds like a similar formula for the
Mhm.
Picasso thing, which is they're just moving the pictures around, and you're like,
Mhm.
I don't know, I don't know if I'm feeling $25 of exhibit here. But then you start to figure like how many people are in here and how much they're making. You're like,
Yeah.
wow, this is pretty lucrative. So I can see minimal setup and
Yeah.
just raking in the dough on
And they
somebody
don't
else's
have
work.
to deal with the original artwork, which would mean lots of insurance and crating and all the, shipping and extra care. Um, yeah, it's definitely a moneymaker. But I think
Yeah.
like there's definitely something to be said for seeing a piece of original art in person and really like experiencing it the way the artist did and looking up close and seeing those brush strokes and details that, you won't see when it's blown up and digitized that way.
Yeah. Like Mona Lisa, not a big picture,
Right.
not a big picture.
Tiny. Yeah.
And had that same feeling going to Mount Rushmore, where you
Mhm.
always see a close up of it, and you're like, this must be huge. This is going to be huge. And then you
Yeah.
drive up and you're like, hold on, that's it. That's it right there. I mean,
But
no
it's
doubt
far
it took some,
away. Yeah.
yeah, but even when you got closer, you're like, still, that's not as big as I was led to believe. But
Yeah, I love the
the one,
pictures of this, like the sculptor scaling Lincoln's nose or something. Like there's some really cool old black and white photos of Mount
yeah, when they
Rushmore.
explain how they do that, that's interesting of having
Hmm.
the model of it and then building the thing on the side of the mountain to be able to just say, okay, blast right
Yeah,
here, and then eventually you're going to smooth that down. Yeah,
I
that was
know.
interesting.
Can you imagine?
The but traveling around, not much of a world traveler, but the US, I've been around a lot of it, and there's a big difference between natural beauty and created things. I think like you go to the Grand Canyon and
Oh
you're
yeah,
like, whoa, there it is, wow.
yeah.
And then Mount Rushmore, disappointing. Devil's Tower, oh, that's interesting. That's a bigger scale than you would expect standing beside it. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's something to be said for the natural wonders, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I do like visiting architectural sites like the Familia Sagrada, the one that Gaudi did in Barcelona. That's a really
Mm.
amazing cathedral, and he's got all those organic shapes and stuff. The towers are all twisty and twined, and I mean, that was an amazing piece of architecture. And then, yeah, I'm just trying to think of like, I guess just, strolling around Manhattan is kind of cool too when you see all the architectural details and stuff. I guess that's where I really do appreciate the man-made, like our innovation and, you know, just it is not natural. It's not really supposed to be natural. I guess
Yeah.
it's more like, look at us, we are man. What we
I get
did.
that when I look at like interstates, the bridges and
Oh
things just on a
yeah,
clover leaf, and
civil
you go, look at the
engineering's project,
scale of
right?
this thing that people did this just so you didn't have to slow down to turn this way. Like
Right.
you can still go 70 and go that direction now. It's
Exactly. Yeah.
amazing. And then to know that you can go inside of those bridges, like they look like they're solid, but they're not solid. You can go inside and there's huge
Oh
cavernous
wow.
places inside. When I was a trooper, we did a lot of training at the bridge tunnels and like the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, Monitor Merrimack, and some other ones around. And you just don't realize how big the tunnel is versus the area you drive in. So
Mm.
that's pretty
Mhm.
amazing. I haven't seen behind the scenes at the tunnel. From what I've seen on the shows, it looks like it's a smaller tube than like the Hampton Tunnel is a big tube, and then you drive through the middle. Like you can go all around it, and
Mm.
it's interesting. Like it's scary because there's just concrete panels that are suspended above you when you're driving, and you're like, oh, how much does that weigh that could
Right.
fall on you? And there's how
Exactly.
many of them going along this stretch of road. But yeah, it
Yeah.
is interesting when you see. I guess Melville was right in Moby Dick, the chapter about the tail, when he talked about the grandeur of size of things and strength
Mm.
and how it's conveyed through that. Hmm,
Yeah. The
interesting.
awesomeness of nature, for sure.
So then, if you're using what you learned in exhibit design for laying out your books, do you have times where you have to rewrite them and you think this was going to go this direction, and then you think later of a different
Mm.
thing that changes stuff down the line? How,
Oh yeah.
once you start working on it, how much do you have to go back and revise?
Um, yeah, I guess there were a few times when I've done it and it worked out the way I saw it in my head, but usually I do have to go back and revise quite a bit. It's usually something lacking in the story, like, my arc isn't hitting a high enough point, or um, I need like I need a little extra room at the end to wind something down, or um, yeah, so that would change basically the whole pacing of the illustrations. You might have to take some illustrations out or reduce some full pages to spots, and you know, maybe maybe there's a part in the story where I need that open full spread to kind of pause people and let them slow down, and I hadn't accounted for that at that point in the designing of it. So yeah, that does happen.
Do you storyboard it when you start doing it, or are you
Hmm.
just you do the story and then say, here's the picture, here's the picture?
Um, I'll first in my manuscript, I will call out the page turns. That's kind of the first when I break it up. And then if I feel like that is like I can visualize it, then I'll go to paper and I'll start drawing out the dummy. And it's basically like a storyboard, but I usually do it like almost full size. And I just draw the pictures in really quick with like a Sharpie or something. And just to make sure that there's enough happening in the illustrations to warrant an illustration. And yeah.
Do you have ideal readers or like test groups or people that you show it to when it's still in, when it gets to whatever draft that you feel
Mhm,
like you can show it to someone, whether it's second,
mhm.
third, whatever, and then just to see what their reactions are, to see if it's
Yeah,
making sense?
um, unfortunately, I don't have little kids anymore, but I used to have my little kids read it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm part of critique groups, and so we're all kidlit, usually picture book writers or illustrators and illustrators, and they're really helpful for sort of, you know, beta reading and giving me help on, where the pacing might be slow or what might be missing that I have overlooked. So it's hard to critique your own work. So you really do need those. Like I can read somebody else's piece of work and be like, yeah, that there's a problem here, here, and here. And this part is really good. And I can see it right away. But with my own, I don't know if it's just like self-doubt or maybe we just have blinders on. Like it's hard to see it's hard to see your own, like, the qualities and the problems. So,
Yeah, it's
critique
interesting.
groups are important for sure.
I think the writer always knows more than the reader is going to know. They've thought about it so much
Right.
more, so much backstory. And then
Mhm.
I think that's the good part about getting someone else to read it that you haven't talked to about it, that doesn't know anything about it, because then they can say, well, I didn't know this. And you go, well, of
Yeah.
course, that, Peter Rabbit's mom was, in this headspace when she told Peter to, stay outside or whatever.
Right,
That,
and if they're like, "Oh," then you have a
well, that
problem.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, we
In
do
crit
in my critique groups, we do a lot of, like, fresh reads. So, like, we'll just, have someone who's never seen it before read it out loud to the whole group, and we'll be listening for that part where they kinda, like, stop or get stumble or get caught up on something or they say something wrong, especially if it's rhyming or something. It's really easy to tell when the rhyme's off when someone reads it out loud who's never read it before. So,
Yeah. I've been in a few critique groups where it's all different types of people, so you get different types of topics. But
mhm,
one of my favorite parts about groups like that is meeting strange people, because you're going to meet strange people in those groups, and you just have to, like, the meeting after the critique group is what I like, where you're just talking about whatever, just because it's that kinship of, I don't know if it's creativity or just you can talk about a subject and somebody else understands it a little better. I'm not sure
yeah,
how to explain it, but there are times in the groups where, like, they have the rules. If you have a specific one that, we're all going to do picture books, that I think that's different because you have those guidelines, but you
mhm,
definitely need somebody that's running it enough to give the guidelines so somebody doesn't show up with 8,000 words to look at versus, well, the rule is less than 1,000 or it's 500
yeah,
or whatever. And you need somebody to be able to say, okay, stop right there. That's enough. And I've been in groups where you submit your writing before the group and then you talk about it there. And then
mhm,
others where you read it in the group, or you read it, somebody else reads it, or people just read it to themselves. But it is valuable to be able to hear somebody else read it, and it is aggravating when they read it wrong. But
mhm.
that's when you start to think, is my punctuation wrong? What's going on here?
Right, right, or dialogue is the dialogue working? Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
I
totally different when you're writing a longer sort of novel, than picture books. Picture books are like because 'cause they're so short. I mean, most picture books are less than 500 words, so it's pretty easy to get through, like, 4 or 5 picture book manuscripts and critique them in, one sitting. We'll meet for, like, an hour and a half and just go through one after the other. So,
Do you seek to teach new words in a book? Like, say, I wanna teach, if it's for a
mhm,
specific age group, are you thinking this is a book that's going to be read to them, or this is a book
mhm,
that either they will read or eventually read? And do you
mhm,
want to put a word in there that now I think of, like, Tiny Toons, where you learn so many different words from that you wouldn't normally, and you go, oh, well, that's a great way. I mean, it's a great way to brainwash somebody, but it's also a great way to teach them some,
Sure.
teach
Yeah.
them a few new words.
Yeah. So like my first one here, Nudie that's about nudibranchs. So a lot of people don't know what a nudibranch is. So like in the first few pages, it's like nudibranch, I'm a nudibranch. So we are teaching like some words for sure.
I don't know what a nudibranch is.
Yeah,
Is
that's
it a
okay.
candy
You're
bar
not
or an
alone.
animal?
It looks like a candy. It looks like a piece of candy. They're really brightly colored sea slugs. So
Oh, okay.
they're really
Nice.
beautiful. Yeah, lots of different patterns, and so they do kind of make me think of taffy, like saltwater taffy or something. So they're so pretty and colorful. But yeah.
Hmm. There was a slug joke I knew, but I can't remember the exact setup for it, and it
Uh,
takes a while to tell. So I'll have to see if I can recall from my subconscious. But that's nice. That teaches kids things that they wouldn't normally know. That's great.
yeah. Yeah,
So
that's kind of my favorite is informational fiction. So I have characters and silly stories and stuff going on, but at the same time I'm trying to like teach them something, usually about nature or the natural world.
nice. I remember a Tiny Toons one where there was just a bunch of anvils falling, and I think it was Plucky Duck. It might have been Daffy Duck. Might have been just a regular Looney Tunes one and not a Tiny Toons. And then he says, "What's with all these falling anvils?" And you're like, if you didn't know what an anvil was, now you know.
Right.
So that's pretty great.
You have to be a certain age to know what an anvil is, I think, because it was used so much in Coyote and Roadrunner that you could
Yeah.
not know, I mean, what an anvil is.
Yeah. And then like in Transformers, watching that cartoon growing up and
Uh-huh.
them using bigger words, and then you say them, and my mom's like, what do you where'd you learn that word? Or I'm like, oh, that's Transformers.
Yeah.
So then when you're playing Transformers, GI Joe, Legos, whatever, you
Mhm.
have this vocabulary that is a little more than I think what you would normally get from a kid
True,
outside
yeah.
playing with a hoop and a stick.
Mhm. And they might not know what the word actually means. Like, they might be using it out of context or something. So it
Oh,
could be
like you use
interesting.
big words so you sound photosynthesis?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. Or like doctor photosynthesis.
Yeah.
Like it's the name of a character or
Nice. So when you're getting your book together, are you
Mhm.
doing pretty much everything where you're figuring the layout, the typeset, the font, the colors, where you put the words on the page and all that? Or do you have
Yeah.
an editor that goes over that?
Um, I I do book design too, so I think I think most editors appreciate that I go the little extra step and I go into the book layout and the type and I really try to make it all fit together. I really enjoy that process.
Mm.
And then it just makes the job on their end a little easier when it comes to the book design. But then the contrast is that if there are editorial changes, I got to go back and change everything around and do it again. But I don't mind doing it because I enjoy it. But
How do you do?
normally artists would just submit the artwork and then the text would be laid in by the publisher.
Yeah. How do you do your publishing?
Traditionally, so I have an agent and she submits it to publishers, usually a dummy and a manuscript. So a dummy would have like just black and white sketches and maybe a couple of color spreads in there to sort of show you the color sample. And she would put that with the manuscript on submission. She would write a cover letter and send it out to editors at different publishers.
Do you is the scene from the elf where I can't remember his name, but the angry elf comes in to write the book, Peter Dinklage, when you is that scene true on how a picture book person is like called in and they want to write a book about something? when
Okay,
you have
you're
to
gonna have to
pitch
refresh my
ideas.
memory. What what does he
Oh,
say? 'Cause
oh,
I don't
have you seen
remember.
The Elf
I have,
or Elf? I guess it's not The
we
Elf.
did
That
not
sounds like
see it
more like a horror movie.
this Christmas. Usually we see it every year, but we did not do it this one, so I might not remember
So
that part. But
they have the kids book. They have the kids book that
uh-huh.
is, I can't remember the guy's name. That's the dad in that. Anyway, his kid was in Entourage. That doesn't matter. So they're making this kids book, and then the last few pages don't get printed, so nobody knows what it is. And now they have to print one before this certain time. So they bring
Uh-huh.
in the famous kids book writer, which is Peter Dinklage,
Okay.
and I think that's how you say his name. And
Yeah.
he comes in, and Buddy the Elf is in there during this pitch meeting, and they're
Uh-huh.
talking about different ideas for books. And like, I think one was it was either a rabbit or some sort of vegetable, and Peter was like, never write a book about that because it's too vulnerable. A tomato, maybe it was a tomato. I don't know, but
It's too
but
vulnerable.
anyway, yeah, the exchange was him, pitching. They were pitching him ideas, and he's like, "No,
Mhm.
when do you need it by?" And he's like, "Okay, I'll do it." And then Buddy goes, "Oh, it's it's an elf. How's Santa? Does Santa know you're up here or something like that?" And then Peter says, "That's very funny. Call me an elf one more time."
Oh,
And
yeah. I
then he
do
calls
remember
him
that
that.
part. Yeah.
Then he gets up on the table and runs at him. And he goes, "It's an
Right, he
angry
attacks
elf."
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But I just don't know how accurate that is for like the traditional publishing
Honestly,
of a picture
I
book.
I think that's maybe modeled more after adult publishers.
Mm.
I don't know. I feel like the adult publishing world is a little more cutthroat and, the stakes are a lot higher. Um, Kidlit, it seems like, usually publishers know that they're not gonna make a lot of money on a picture book.
Huh.
But they do
I
it.
thought those would be pretty good selling.
Oh, no. Well, they do sell, and in fact, during the pandemic, remember, there was a big rise in picture books because people were homeschooling and they needed more entertainment for their kids, so they were, like, trying to get them off the screens for a minute, so they were buying lots of picture books. Um, but yeah, I feel like, picture books will always be popular because it's healthy for kids, little kids, to learn how to read on paper, and to see the pictures and stuff is just cognitively better for them than going digital. But I think, like, you know, when it comes down to the sales and the profits, when you're doing an adult book, you're printing black and white
Mm.
interior, cheaper paper. When you're doing a picture book, it's all like really high gloss paper. It's big, it's oversized, everything's full color. You've got these nice, hardcovers and sometimes jackets that go over it. I mean, there's a lot of cost in printing a picture book. So they have to make that back and then a little extra. Plus they're giving royalties to the author and the illustrator, you know, and the agents if there's like, if they're agented, separate agents. So it's a lot.
Have all your books been through traditional publishing, or have you done any self-publishing or any experience with that?
When I started out, I did some self-publishing, and that's kind of what made me realize that I wanted to get into picture books. I was like, "Oh, this is fun. I like making books." And
Yeah.
what I was making were like coloring books or activity books, things that I could use as a tool when I was doing art classes and that kind of stuff. I was doing a lot of community outreach and teaching art to all kinds of people. So yeah, that was my experience first, and then I found out about Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI, um,
Hmm.
and I joined them, and then that's when I realized, oh, there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this, and I want to learn the right way so that I can actually get published because I would like to. So
What's the wrong way?
to just wing it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's a lot of people who self-publish, and a lot of times when you pick up those books, if they are not trained, you can tell right away. that it's a self-published book. So
I'm I've all of mine are self-published. I did one through a publishing house, but basically that's self-published because the writer is the writer is who they're selling things to, not to the reader. That's my
right,
perspective of the self-publishing houses. But
right,
I do all mine
exactly.
through Amazon KDP, and I
Hmm.
really like being able to design the covers, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's the fun part is putting it all together. I mean, you did the work of writing the book, and now
Hmm.
you get to package it, and
Hmm. Well, you're going to
just
have to
how
market it.
easy it
So
is.
yeah.
Yeah, I just set it out there, release it into the world. I don't worry about marketing so much, but
Okay.
I can see like that I would classify as the wrong way if you want anybody to read it. But then I fall back on Melville and how his stuff wasn't well received while he was alive. So I figure I'm leaving
Hmm.
this out there for posterity.
Sure.
But
Yeah. Well, and
the
again, adult is different than kids' books. So like with children's books, there are a lot of adults who write children's books for the first time who sort of like are too teachy. Like I'm going to be preachy teachy to the kid, or I'm going to sing song it, like a grandparent would to their grandchild. And the way they use the language is just not like, it's not resonating with kids. So you want to write in a way using a voice that is more relatable. Excuse me, I'm dying here, but more relatable for your reader, which is a very specific person. It's not another adult. So I feel like a lot of times people will write children's books as an adult would talk to a kid. And what they need to be doing is writing as a kid would talk to a kid. You know what I mean?
it's strange when you see 2-year-olds meet on the playground and you're like, what's that conversation like?
It's so
And
awesome, isn't it?
it's not like a regular conversation when you try to listen to it. That's bizarre. But when you do your children's books,
Want to be
then
friends?
you,
Okay, let's go.
yeah. What are we gonna do? Go to the slide. All right.
Yeah,
No, it's very abbreviated. I like the skeletal structure of it.
right. Direct,
But
right to the point.
when you're writing the book, then are you worried more about tone and pitch rather than the sing-songiness of it? Like the
Hmm.
maybe I would call it more lyricism. Like
Hmm.
when I think about
Hmm.
poetry, and I've done a lot more poetry now within the past few years than I thought I ever would, but I am definitely more I like to write more of free verse than
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
rhyming stuff. And I think there's a place for the rhyming stuff, but it does get a little monotonous after a while. And if you can
right.
guess what the next word's going to be, I feel like that's you could probably do better on that. But that doesn't mean I think a thing should rhyme, not rhyme, because that bothers me
Hmm.
too.
Yeah.
So if you pick the program, stick with it.
Exactly. And that's what you do when you're starting out to write a picture book, is you're going to pick something like, oh, this is going to be in rhyme, or this is going to be it's going to have lyrics, like not lyrics, but
Lyrical,
lyrical
yeah.
text. Yeah. So like this one, Wonder of the Woods, that's what I did with that one. It's lyrical. It's from the second person point of view. So it's like, if you see this, you will do that. And it's all about this little girl, like, exploring the woods behind her house. And so that has a very different tone and feel than like Nudie Gill, where Nudie Gill is more like almost like a cartoon or a graphic novel, where it's just like blah 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 blah. They're talking to each other, kind of thing. And there's
Okay.
jokes and stuff. So yeah.
Is are most I mean, would you call a picture book a kid's book? Is that derogatory?
No.
Okay. So is a kid's book are they more written in first and third, or because second
Second's a
person
little
is kind of,
unusual. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, but there are like, if you give a mouse a cookie, that's a real popular second person point of view, book.
okay.
That was really popular one. Um, and it's been done so many times. Like if you give kibble, if you give a hamster a kibble, or I don't know. There's all these things that spin-offs of it. But yeah, generally, it depends. It's like, do you want to be telling a story about something? It would be more like third person, or do you want to be the main character going through this experience? That would be more like first person. I did this, I did that, then I did that,
Yeah.
So it gives that more directness and connection with the main character. So there are like, more like theme oriented picture books, but then like they might be visiting several different families throughout the book or something where you wouldn't really want it to be first person. Although I have seen people do that, which is kind of tricky. But if
Mm.
it's more character centered, like, is it like Olivia the pig or whatever, that would be she's talking, she's telling the story through the whole thing.
Yeah. I guess I haven't thought about perspective as much for different types of kids versus adult books, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you don't see too many kids books with chapters that have different perspectives in each chapter.
Right. There was one, I think it was, oh gosh, I can't remember whose it was. It was called Pax, and it was about the fox. And so it's a chapter book though. So it's more like early middle grade type reading.
Okay.
But like one chapter would be from the boy's point of view, and then the next chapter would be from Pax's point of view, the fox. And then we would go back and back and back. And that, and that's, a little bit of a stretch for that age group, but they did it so clearly, they made it very clear who was talking and what's happening. So it was very, a younger reader could figure it out what was going on.
Yeah. It definitely seems like there's thought into how you teach people things.
Mhm. Mhm.
How do
Yeah, and it
you
preps them
approach?
for reading more sophisticated work in the future, so.
Yeah. So I wonder if people that don't like reading when they're older is just because they didn't read the right stuff when they were younger.
Absolutely, because I was one of those people.
Hmm.
Yep. I didn't like to read at all when I was little. I think it was hard for me to read too. I wasn't, like, natural at it. It took me a while to, like,
Yeah,
I
I
feel
wasn't.
like when I was little, the teachers kept trying to push me to read faster and faster, and then I just stopped enjoying it. I kept, like, focusing on, "Oh, no, I messed up," or "I can't," like, I just got so in my head about it. I couldn't read. So,
Yeah, sometimes it's like when you read a book to someone and you're concentrating on the speed of the read, then
mm,
you get to the whatever end of the section and you don't know what you just read. It's
right,
not like a reading comprehension. And then
exactly.
if I'm reading something that I really want to understand, it takes a little while longer because sometimes you stop and go back and read something else, or like
Mhm,
read the sentence again, or
mhm.
make a note or whatever. Hmm.
Right, right. Yeah, I love highlighting books. That's my favorite thing to do. Just go in there and be like, "Oh, yeah.
For the
Oh, yeah."
lines or
I don't know, just the way text comes together, or it's the meaning, and maybe especially if it's not super direct. I love that, and I just wanna, like, highlight it and look at it again.
yeah. Yeah, those are, and I wonder if that's the type of, when they wrote that, was it an idea where they were doing something else and then they had the idea and they're like, "Oh, I need to write that down." And then they built that thing around that line because the
Could
line is
be.
so great.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you see them string together those and you go, "This whole chapter is like this." Or
Mhm.
it's just these little pieces that jump out at you.
Right. I also really like reading on my Kindle, and I love reading on my Kindle when I see other people have highlighted something, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, they got it
Yeah,
right
that's
there.
fun.
That's it."
Yeah. And then you can go back and look at all the stuff you've highlighted and
Uh-huh.
look at all the words you looked up. So you go, "Oh, I need to learn these words again."
Right. Yeah, look what I
Because
learned.
sometimes you come across a word that if you're reading it in a book, you're not going to look it up because you think you know what it means. And then you read it on the Kindle and you go, "That, I'm pretty sure that that word doesn't mean that." And then you look it up and the word has 6 or 7 different meanings that you didn't know about.
Mm,
And you
mhm.
realize, wow, that's very nuanced as to when you would use that Words mean things. It's fun.
Yeah, for sure.
How do you approach then teaching art to people? Are you teaching adults? Are you teaching kids or everyone, or is it different?
Everyone. Yeah, sometimes it's families. I do some work over at the Children's Museum. Sometimes it's just adults, which I do over at the libraries. Um, yeah, I am very much a process art teacher. I'm not the person to go to if you want to learn how to, you know, draw your pet like accurately. I mean, I do children's books, I like expression. I like expressionism. It's my thing. And so, yeah, I want people to just like have fun, explore their creativity, get into the process, try some new things, and enjoy it. And like, I want people smiling. I don't want them like worried that they're going to do it wrong or hating themselves for sucking or, I don't like doing those kinds of classes. They're not fun.
Hmm.
So yeah, we
Yeah.
usually like we'll start with a theme or a process or something and just, if people want to go off on a tangent, go for it. I'm like just play, experiment.
I always found it interesting in art class, middle school, or I think they had it. They didn't have it in high school by the time you got there. Maybe they did, but in middle school, where you get the things like you finish your drawing, which was draw a nature scene. You go, okay, great.
Mhm.
It's going to be a volcano. There's obviously going to be pterodactyls and some jungle, and
Obviously,
then
yeah.
then you go up. Here you go. I think I'm done. And then
Mhm.
the art teacher goes, "You got a lot of empty space here. You got a lot of empty space here." Like, yeah, that's it's empty space to draw your eyes to the volcano. So then you start to try to explain it, and I think that's when you get to the mindset of the artist that comes up with data, and you're just like, "There's a dot on a white piece of canvas," and you're like, That's art." And then you go, "Why is that art?" And they explain this big story to you, and you go, it makes more sense now that you explained it, but I still think it's just a
Right,
dot on a piece of paper. But
right.
I can see a little better. I think that's a different type of art, the art of explaining, or I think you should probably be in sales versus art because you're trying to sell me this art. But
Or it's conceptual. It's more like philosophy or psychology or, it's very mental as opposed to more physical art, which I like more physical.
and then
Like
he, and then
move the
shows like,
paint and see the marks and, the scratches and the blendings. And I mean, that's the stuff that I love. I just get so excited over it.
so does process mean it's more about how you do it versus what you're doing?
Hmm.
Or what, how is
Yes,
that process art?
absolutely.
Okay.
Perfect. Hmm.
Hmm. So you go to the children's museum and you have the paint can that's on the pendulum and it swings all around and you put different color in it. That's more of a process art.
Yeah, that would be considered process art. It's not how I paint. I mean, I've seen those, you know, reels where, the people are just flying on the trapeze and throwing the paint around and stuff.
Yeah.
That's great if you have the space to do it and the setup. I mean, that looks like a lot of fun, honestly. But yeah, usually at the Children's Museum, we don't have that kind of space and setup.
What, what do you think
We try not to make a
draws,
huge mess.
what do you think draws the human to art? What's your
Um,
definition of art? Maybe we'll start there.
yeah, I think it's a way of expressing something inside, something that needs to come out and, needs to be outside of yourself so that you can see it was there. It's almost like, leaving leaving your mark on the world. Like when you think about, ancient people who would leave their handprints on the walls or try to you know, summon their hunting abilities by painting the animals being hunted. It's it's almost like taking dreaming to another level and seeing it manifested out of yourself and into the world. I think it's so healthy for people to experience that and try to do that on a regular basis, because I think we can all get so stuck inside ourselves and this little box of who we think we are. And when you create art, you're letting all those things go, and you're just experiencing something outside of yourself. That
Why
would
do
be
you
my
think some
thought.
people are attracted to art more than others, and then people that do art pick one way to do it versus another? I guess that's a double question.
Um, I think a lot of people who are not attracted to art haven't tried doing it themselves. I think once you experience the process of it, and I get a lot of people like that in my classes, because I was working with people in addiction recovery programs, and they were like, I haven't picked up a crayon since I was a kid, and I can't draw a stick figure, whatever, like they just don't have any use for art, no appreciation for it. Like, just, I don't never even really think about it. But when I get them doing stuff, they by the end of the class, they're just like, that was really fun. I had fun doing that, and I'm looking forward to coming back next week. I think there's a real value in that, of just, sort of letting go of your preconceptions and just opening your mind and giving something a try, which I also feel like is really good for you. It's good for your mental well-being to try new things. It's good for your brain. It's actually really, I mean, they've even proven that it's good for people who have brain damage and are trying to, you know, make new synapses happen in their brain and new connections. Um, Trying new things is a way of making your brain heal itself in ways.
Yeah,
So,
I visualize the brain as like a bunch of hallways, and
mhm,
sometimes you know there's a hallway and you've gone down it before in your life, but you don't go down it that often, so it gets cobwebs and things like that on it.
mm,
So
mhm,
then that could be that creative side of you that you're ignoring
mhm.
for the more seemingly immediate have to survive in the world type thing.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
there's other hallways that you've just looked down that you've never gone down, and you can't see the end of it. And it
Mhm,
makes me think of the scene in the Matrix where Neo's going to get out of the car and Trinity says, no, you know where that road goes. So,
mhm,
but that's the mind there. So it's interesting to go down those hallways every now and then, clean them out, and then see what's up. That if your tastes change, like your taste buds change every 7 years or so, read a paper
mhm,
about that. That it's not like they change on the dot every 7 years, but they're always changing. So
mhm,
maybe you
mhm,
didn't like greens some years ago, but now you taste them and you like them. That maybe
mhm.
that's how it is with other artistic or creative things, where you have to find the one that you like at that moment. How do you account for people that do different types of art? Like, how would a person pick sculpture over painting, over
Mm, mhm.
words, over drawing? What do you
Yeah,
think
I
that is?
I think there are so many different ways to express yourself, and they're all just different mediums for doing that, for self-expression. And um, some people are just better with words, and some people like that tactile feeling of the clay, and that's just where they could, get lost in it, get lost in that moment of, either writing a novel or creating a sculpture from clay, or getting in the metal shop and bending steel and whatever it is that just really gets you in that creative flow, that zone. That's what you need to be doing. It's like, when it feels right, you know?
Do you see, um, do you feel that connection with people when you're in that picture book group versus different writers? Like you would, for me, if I talk to a poet, I feel like I understand that a lot. Like I can tell if I think a person is a poet based on how they would talk about something. Sorry about my
Mhm.
dog there.
That's okay.
Somebody's some she sees something she doesn't care for. But so if I talk to a poet, I can tell
Mhm.
that. I mean, I don't mean that as in I'm a poet, so I know when I see one, but I can see the similarities. Like I feel like they've talked about or thought about the things I've thought about,
Yeah,
experienced them.
exactly.
They've gone down that hallway. So when
Yes.
you talk to a writer, you still
Mhm.
feel things like you can understand certain perspectives of a writer. But then when you talk to a person that does picture books, you understand that in a different way because
Mhm.
they've done those things and thought about those things.
For sure. Yeah. It's like they're
S-
speaking your language. Mhm.
Can you identify that in an art class where somebody says or does something and you go, oh, well, maybe you need to try sculpture or you need to try etching or you need to try something else? Like
Yeah,
you might like that.
I might if I'm seeing something that makes me think of another medium, I might. Or if they just flat out tell me like I can't draw, but I love to sing, then I'm like, okay, well, let's pretend we're drawing a song. Oh, what would that look like? And
Mm.
like trying to cross blend creative outlets is always fun too. So I I think like some people are just more outgoing and reveal more about what's going on inside of themselves, and they're better at articulating it than others. So I would say with some people, you might not know what direction to point them in until you get to know them better.
Yeah, I think that's the important of I didn't realize it growing up, but I
Hmm.
see it now more, the importance of that general art view or art experience where it should be in school, even elementary school and then middle school and high school for sure, that you
Hmm.
have that exposure to different types of things so you can go, oh, this is the medium that I want to that I feel like I can express this idea in better than this other way.
Hmm.
How do you get into that creative mood or that connection with creativity, or when do you feel you're most creative?
I think I feel most creative in the morning, like just sort of after I've woken up, had some coffee, got the kids to school, and then I have that quiet time, like when I get back, and I just that's when I feel like, okay, I'm ready to tackle something. And yeah, I I see it like I am a kind of creative person that I need to do something every day. Like I don't like taking vacations from my creativity. I
Yeah.
like to do something every day, and even if it's not like something I'm getting paid for, I want to like maybe do some weird little sketches, or I might want to like even work in the garden or something, putting together something. I make murals. I do murals in my house. Like maybe I want to repaint something, or like reorganize something in a way that makes more sense to me. I feel like all of those activities, you know, need your creativity to do in
Do
a
you,
purposeful way.
do you think that creativity is something that is from within us or something we're connecting with outside of us, or is it a mixture of both?
I don't know. That's a good question. It probably is both. That would be my guess. It's I know that the more you use it, the more you want to use it.
I concur.
Hmm.
Yeah. It gets to the point where you can get yourself in that mindset and you've done it so often. I think that's why they probably say for writing, it's showing up. Like, even
Hmm.
if you're not doing it, show up to the time and place where
Hmm.
you do your writing and then just do something. And then
Yeah.
eventually you'll get the muscle memory or the connection, or your
Hmm.
mind will know that's the time you have to do that thing.
Yeah. And do you find like if you do a little exercise or something, like all of a sudden things open up and you start coming up with solutions to things that you couldn't think of before? Like
Yeah.
just going
The,
outside for a walk, or, getting a
mm,
swim in or something like that. It's like, oh, okay. I always have to
Yeah,
have
some sort
like
of
my phone so I can
physical
be like, do
activity.
this before I forget.
Yeah, that's the difference is between a
Mhm.
writer and not a writer, I think, is that first step is you write it down. You record it somehow. In
Right.
the iPhone or phones that you can take notes on are definitely the game changer because now I don't have to carry
Mhm.
around a tablet everywhere. But
Right.
it's yeah.
Right on your hand.
Anytime you,
It's
because it only takes a few times to forget the idea
I
before you're like,
know, and you're
okay,
like, "I
I got to
hate it
write
when
this
that
down
happens.
immediately.
I lost it." I told myself I wasn't gonna forget, you know? How can
Do
I
you
possibly
do?
forget this? It's genius. And then you
Can you
forget. Like,
record
"What?"
ideas like that by drawing them, or do you do mainly words about them, or do you go, oh, here's an idea, and you do a quick sketch about it to remember it?
Mostly it's words, but yeah, if it were like perspective or something like, "Oh, I need to be looking down on this scene," or "I need to
Mm,
look at this from the squirrel's point of view," or, something like that, then I might do like a little sketch. But it would just be something so obscure that only I would understand, like, what that's supposed to mean.
nice. I think the connection I have with getting into that creative mindset is something physical, whether you're
Mhm,
running or swimming or
mhm.
cutting the grass, not in a cutting a grass type of cutting a bud up, but cutting the grass as in mowing the lawn,
Right.
that something like that. And then it's weird how when you're in the shower, you get some great ideas. So you have
Mhm.
to be able to record those in there somehow. And I think that has to do somehow with the negative ions in water. But I've read some
Mm.
things, done some research on that. That's interesting, like float tanks
Oh,
and
wow.
then the swimming part. It's just if you're feeling like you're not as creative as you want to be, listen to some
Mhm.
music that you like, do something like that.
Yeah.
And when people talk about writer's block, I'm not sure. I guess it's a real thing, but I don't think it's like people think it is. I think it's just the procrastination in your mind that's keeping you from doing it. That
It's some
it's
kind
some
of
part of you.
fear. There's something you're afraid of,
Mm,
and you gotta kinda figure out what it is, what's holding you back, because it's usually something dumb that you really shouldn't be afraid of anyway, but it, could be like, failure. Just I'm just I'm not gonna be able to do it. I'm not gonna be able to finish it. I'm not gonna come up with a good idea. I'm not gonna do this, We negative talk ourselves a lot, and I think that's what causes it.
yeah, maybe the is it the War of Art, whatever that book is that
Mm,
talks about resistance, overcoming resistance. I put that
mhm.
into a category of like the book The Secret, which is one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, I
It's a
know.
mindset thing, but
Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm.
what's the best way for people to follow your work and see, like, if you're doing training, how to maybe sign up for that or follow along?
Um, yeah, so I have a website, bonniekelso.com, and all my books are on there. Also my social media links are in there on my website. I do a lot of, in-person workshops, around town. I have done online ones too in the past, especially during COVID. I was making some online classes, um, but usually I have links to those on my website as well, and, um, yeah, I mean, I should I don't have time, honestly, but I would love to create more, like, boxed classes or courses or projects for people to do just for fun online, and just have those available because, I'm very passionate about the way I teach and like we were just talking about, like, helping people get in touch with their creativity, I think is just especially people who have never tried it. Those are the people I really wanna reach out to. Um, but it's kinda hard because it's like they wouldn't be looking at my website anyway, probably. Unless maybe they were buying a book for their kid and they were like, "Oh, this is interesting and maybe I'll try it," who knows?
Yeah.
But
Well, still on Instagram or something like that.
yeah,
You do like a
exactly.
1 minute or 5 minute or something in between
Mhm.
on some particular art topic. It's that whole
Yep.
world of content creation. And then you start to wonder, why am I doing this? But if it's to create this database of things that you've learned, that seems like worth
Uh-huh.
it. That's
That's
like
true.
podcasting is more of, it's like a writer's group where you meet all these creative people and get to talk with them that
Right.
you wouldn't meet any other way. So
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
when you're sitting there wondering, what am I doing? That's what you're doing.
Uh-huh. Okay, good. You're encouraging me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's
I'll
good.
do something.
And then it's like if you think I can't write, you go, well, I bet there's a minimum amount of words a day, whether you use word count or topic or time. There's
Mhm.
something that you could set aside and go, okay, I can do that. Like, can you write for 10 minutes a day? Can you write about a certain topic for 10 minutes? Can you write 3,000 words a day? Does that seem like a lot?
Mhm.
It does. How about 200? How about 100? How about 30? Can you write
Right.
30 words in a day? And at the end of the week, you got over 100. So that's pretty good. Those things add up. It's just like with working out. Think about reps. Don't
Right.
think about I need to do a 500-pound squat right now. Think about, well, let me do, 10 50-pound squats or 10 body weight squats. And then how's that going to add up over time? So
Mhm.
that's how I look at writing. And then that gets you to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write 30 words. I can do that. So
Mhm.
today I can say I'm a writer because I wrote 30 words.
Mhm.
Hopefully it's more than that and it'll get to more than that. But yeah, I would
Yeah.
imagine that's the same way for drawing and sculpting and all kinds of other art where
Mhm.
you just say, I'm going to give this much time to it a day. And eventually, if you connect with it, you're going to give more time to it, or you're going to find some other way
Yeah.
to connect with that creative part.
No, you're right. Scheduling your time is really important and, having that uninterrupted time. So like I am going to block out this hour and I'm not going to check my email or I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm just going to be me and the paper and the pen or the type, you know, not a typewriter, but my
Yeah, we know
console or whatever,
keyboard. We got you. We
I'm going to
got you.
shut everything off and I'm just going to do it. And then, yeah, you might sit there that first hour and struggle, but you keep showing up every day and you do it, you're going to make some progress eventually. I know like a couple of years ago, I wrote a middle grade novel. So that was my first time writing a novel. And that's what I did. I think I did it during NaNoWriMo and it was during November. So every day I woke up in the morning, I was prepared for it. I was like, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my coffee and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write. And I'm going to write until I get a chapter done. And then I'm going to write the next sentence in the next chapter. And that was kind of my lead on into the next chapter.
Nice.
And had already prepared an outline and everything. So it was easy because I knew that I was going to sit down for this time and I was going to tell this story. And it was so much fun. And now my agent has it now. She's going to look at it, but I have been revising it. Revising it hasn't been as much fun, but writing the initial
That's the
draft
work.
was
Yeah.
like so much fun. I really enjoyed it because I was like, it felt like there was such a consistency, and I really had that story in my head, and it needed to come out, and I got it out. So whether it ever gets published or not doesn't really matter to me. It's like that story is there now, and it was just the coolest experience because I've never written
Yeah,
anything
that's
that
great.
long. You know,
How long was it?
30,000 words.
That's pretty
Yeah.
good. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it's like an early middle grade. Mhm.
Yeah. I like that. And they're like that length is good for e-readers too, just
Mhm.
because you feel like you can progress through it. If you look at
Yeah,
a book
right?
and it says 10,000 pages on an e-reader,
Yeah,
you
you're
go,
like, "Ugh."
I don't know about that. But if you got one that you can go through two or three pages and then you're done with that section, then you
Uh-huh.
can read that, and you can have those little times of the day to read that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It's exciting. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't, or any thoughts you have in closing?
No, I think we covered a lot. Yeah. Um, yeah, I just, I love my books, and here they are.
Nice.
You got Sea Smiles. This one is a trilogy. This is the first one. The second one is coming out in March, and then the third one, Sea Suds, will be next spring, spring
Okay.
2026. So, but it's all about a little girl who is like, she's lost her teeth. She can't fall asleep, and then she's got to take a bath. So, and then she meets all these sea creatures. It's all
Nice.
ocean stuff. So again, the informational fiction stuff. This one's cool too. In a cave. I did not write this one. I illustrated it, but this has lovely rhyming in it. Beautiful.
Oh,
Heather Kinzer's work. But I love outdoor stuff. I love going and exploring caves and canyoneering and stuff. So when I read this, I was like, I can see it in my head.
nice.
I've been there. So that was really
Makes it
fun to
easier to
illustrate.
draw.
Exactly.
Have you been
Well, if I
to
can't
the
see it, I'm not going to say I can. Like you're gonna have to give somebody else give that job. But
Have you been to the Oregon, the lava tubes? Is it in Oregon or is it in Washington? St. Helens lava tubes.
No,
Those are
I've heard
interesting.
about
Like
them. Yeah.
we grew up in Virginia and we did some time over in the Pacific Northwest.
hmm
And Washington and Oregon to me have very different feels. Like
Yeah.
in Washington, you're probably not going to have a fire on the beach, but in Oregon, you can take some wood and do a fire on a beach. In Washington, they probably don't even want you to pick up the trash because it's got to be a natural environment. And you're like, I don't know. But I think the lava tubes are north of that, so they're probably in Washington. And like coming from Virginia, where you go to parks and things, and there's a lot of safety features. You
Right.
go out there, and it's a rickety scaffolding
Yeah.
down into like a multi-story hole into where lava flowed through, and you're like, that you can go down into this, and it's
Is this
okay. And
safe? Yeah.
there's no
No.
lights. You bring your own flashlights. You can walk
hmm
for a mile or so to the end of it, and then you
Right.
could even keep crawling a little ways. And you're like,
Yeah.
this. There's no way they let you do this. Like this seems really dangerous. Like it's not like the Luray Caverns.
Right.
So
All lit up and everything.
yeah,
Yeah. Hawaii's like that too. You would really like Hawaii.
where it's like the Wild West. Maybe that's why they call it
Yes.
the Wild West.
Yes.
We
Yes. It's
went
just
to the Big
raw
Island.
nature. Oh my
We
gosh.
went,
Yeah, the Big Island's
we
great.
went to the Big Island and drove from the airport around Kona over to the other side,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, seeing the volcanoes and then all the cats. There's a lot of cats there because they brought the cats to get rid of the mongoose. They brought the mongoose to get rid of something I can't remember, but then now there's a huge mongoose and cat population,
Yeah.
or
Right.
maybe not a mongoose, the smaller version of that. And
Lots of
and then
chickens too.
yeah,
And
and then
goats. They got a
going
lot of feral goats.
the Bahamas has a lot of goats, yeah. But the we go snorkeling out of some beach in Hawaii through the lava fingers. So it's
Ooh, cool.
just things out, and you're at one point you're going over this razor sharp rock, and then it plunges 30 to 60 feet,
Oh,
and then it
sure.
comes back up to another, and it's not far. It's 10 or 15 feet across, and the waves are going, and you're like, this seems like you shouldn't be allowed to do this. This
Right.
seems very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I
There's
get
like
over this,
crown of
what kind of
thorn
sea monster?
starfish all over the
Yeah.
place. You can't
What
even get
is there going
out
to
of
be
the
a
water.
giant octopus on the other side of
Right.
that that's going to try to attack me? And then as soon as I get over to the other side, there's going to
Sharks,
be a giant shark.
tiger shark.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
awesome, isn't it? See,
it's
I grew up in Virginia too, so I know. I was used to the safety and the little safety net and the beautiful parks and
yeah, yeah. Let's
railings,
go to a battlefield and look around. And yeah,
bridges. Yeah.
it's it is the Wild West. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good to travel around.
it is for sure.
All right. Well, your website will be in the show notes,
Great.
as well as I think I have a link for your Instagram that's also in there. And then if people are interested in that, they can check those out. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a good
Yeah, thank
talk.
you. Yeah, I enjoyed
Insight
it
into
very
picture
much.
books. All right. I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.